There we go. We're recording. This is a special meeting of the Lyme Affordable Housing Commission, Thursday, March 24th. It's 4:36 p.m. In attendance, we have John Coughlin, Jen Miller, Lori Walker, myself, Michael Foliano. And this is a special meeting, so the agenda won't be able to be modified. We have two items on it. The first is to review questions for the developer outreach effort that we had been planning. We're going to defer that until a future meeting. And we're going to jump in straight into item number 3 on the agenda, which is preparation for the March 29th community workshop, which is on track. So let me just do a quick check. This is a work in progress in real time. Did everyone get the most recent second draft of the materials that I sent out?
Yes, from this afternoon. Yes.
Yep, just like an hour ago.
Yep.
John, you have that? Okay, good. So let's just jump in. I'm going to put this up on my screen. I'm not going to display it on the screen because I'm going to bring it up in editable format to capture notes. The overall agenda for the workshop is going to be in roughly 3 parts. We're going to start with a recap of some of the most important background information and some of the thinking from the last workshop. That'll be less than maybe 30% of what we do. There are also some initial results from the capacity analysis that are going to be hot off the presses coming out tomorrow and Monday that Karen Martin and I are going to render into a couple of high-level slides that'll just put some sort of a little bit of quantitative thinking around what we've been communicating is the limitation on land availability. So there'll be some data out there about how much acreage, what percentage of Old Lyme is in each of the major districts, what level of development saturation is there right now, and what's the theoretical, at least, capacity for additional development in town, considering all of the environmental factors, stuff that's already developed, open space, inland waterways and watercourses. So the consultants, GIS people are poring over the maps and trying to come up with a quantitative assessment. When we say there's little land available, we'll at least be able to ascribe some sense of quantity to that. And the earliest preliminary results were that their data is reinforcing that assertion that land is limited. Not surprising, but we'll be able to quantitate it. So that'll take up a couple of slides, and that'll be maybe 20 or 30% of what we do. That's the second part. The third part, we're actually going to roll up our sleeves and get into evolving the strategy that we just scratched the surface of and started to introduce at the first workshop. And that will be in a couple of parts. The first will be kind of the what do we propose to do? Should be no surprises for us. We've been talking about it for a while. Actually, a lot of this was discussed back on the exploratory committee before the commission was even formed. And then a sense of how, what are the things we need to do to implement it without getting into a real granular action list, but at least get a sense of what activities are going to have to be going forward to make the strategy real. And then we have an opportunity to do another pulse poll. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll wrap and go to open Q&A. So that's the overall cadence that we're looking for the workshop. So let's flip through the draft materials. I'm gonna go really fast through the first part. Just starting on the third page, which is just a direct lift from the previous community workshop about the Affordable Housing Commission. There's an overview of the regional and local housing plans. That's a little bit of a modification from what we displayed last time. It was actually displayed at the EDC forum last week by Jen.
Yep.
And so this is now not brand new material, but that's all
Okay, hang on.
pretty standard stuff. Slide 5 is the guiding principles. I made one modification to this. It didn't change it materially, but the wording in bullet 3, we had said we were going to consider relevant policies, practices, comply with statutory requirements, and will not be driven by arbitrary goals. Since we've discussed this now in public and what it means, to just be more direct about it, will not be driven by the 10% exemption threshold or any other arbitrary goals.
I think that's excellent.
So nobody has to guess what we mean by arbitrary goals. It's that one. Thanks, John. Page 6, one really minor change in the data from the housing study. And the second bullet there, we can quantitate that there are over 900 households in Old Lyme that actually qualify as earning less than 80% of the AMI. So that and between that and the 1 in 4 householders that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, that kind of lays out the need factor. So that was the only change to that slide since the last workshop. Slide 7 is a newbie. We've been talking about naturally affordable housing, and it's appearing in our strategy as one of the options in addition to qualified affordable housing. So I thought it was worth just defining that for folks. After what is affordable housing, then we can talk about naturally. What is affordable housing focuses on the state qualified affordable housing, but this is the naturally affordable. That's the lower costs homes that are based on current market rates are typically smaller and naturally fall into a price range that it is less than 30% of the income of people at that 80% AMI. There's some pros and cons to it. The pros being that they're typically less challenged because they're small scale. They're typically less challenged by land and water and sewer availability. They don't require a deed restriction, so they're accessible to people of low income. They're also accessible to people of higher income, but they're not typically competitors for that market. But they don't require a deed restriction, yet they're still accessible. And they can become qualified by the state if an owner-occupied, naturally affordable home is financed by a CHFA mortgage.
And I know we're not chasing a number or anything, Michael, but does all of this, can we, somehow count those as far as the reports go to the government, or no?
Read on. Under the cons, yes. So the answer is no. So unless they're financed by an assisted mortgage,
okay,
they're not qualified and they don't count.
Yep. Okay.
And I think our position is, it's nice that they count, but we're saying we're not going to be driven by the counting. Right. And so we're kind of sticking to our guns here, and that if a person of limited means can take advantage of it, someone who needs affordable housing can avail themselves of that affordable housing through this path, then it's a good thing. And then for me at least, the eye opener was that this can be adversely affected by market conditions that cause increases in sale and rent costs. And I think we just saw that. So I sent around a note that the most recent appeals listing came out, and we dropped from 85 qualified units to 82 qualified units. So we had a net loss of 3 units. And what drove that, there were a bit of an increase in subsidized rentals, but we lost 6 CHFA mortgages. And my sense is, Lori, check me on this, but my sense is that the most likely reason that happened is that homes that were CHFA financed were put up for sale, and they either didn't meet the appraisal needed to qualify for CHFA financing, or they were just priced above it and bought by someone who was out of range. But a hot market actually was the most likely cause that several CHFA qualified, naturally affordable homes were driven off the appeals list and no longer count. So we actually reversed. We're back to 2019 as far as our inventory of affordable housing. So the work continues. Let me pause. Any thoughts about this?
I agree with you that it's probably 3 people that had CHFA loans, put their houses on the market, and they were purchased by people that didn't use CHFA.
And we were hearing back a year or two ago, Lori, that some houses just weren't making the appraisal for CHFA, even if they were small.
They say appraisers told us this week that prices are still increasing. Continue to increase.
Yep. So that's new material, but I thought it was worth just putting a little bit more definition around what we're talking about when we say naturally affordable housing. Again, I would see it still being part of the strategy, but with these with some of these pros and cons in mind. All right, 8, no changes there. That's just reviewing 830G, what it is, and importantly, what it is not, which is a mandate. 830J is the mandate for our plan. Okay, 9. This is old material in a new form. So the attempt here, again, we're in the section now where we're recapping, is to kind of roll up the summary findings from both mostly the regional study into one page. And I know it's fairly, there's a lot of bullets on here, but I'm going to try and move this relatively quickly since it's material that's been presented and published before. And again, this was presented at the EDC forum last week, pretty much in exactly this one. I might have made really small changes to this, but mostly in its current form. So Jen, if there was any feedback from that I should incorporate, let me know. But the points are basically jobs, housing, and the economy are all tightly linked. Population and job growth in the region and state are stagnant and declining. Population is aging and will continue to do so it's projected to continue to do so for coming decades. Our economy is and will continue to be increasingly dependent on a workforce made up of smaller households seeking smaller homes and rentals. I think I split this it was in one place last week and I split it into 2, Jen.
Yeah, you just had a text box at the bottom. Yep.
Yep.
I think just to let you know, I mean, I think that so I followed like the chair of the ARPA committee and some of the EDC folks, and by that time in the agenda, actually the issues around the economy of the community and the population and the shifts in aging, et cetera, had all been brought up already. So they were already talking about it without even talking about housing.
Good. So
yeah, and a couple of them then went on to mention housing, but when I spoke, it was already like teed up for me. So
so we were just able to layer on housing onto the
right.
the demographics and the economics. That's great. That's exactly
Right.
what I hope would happen.
Right.
Okay, then getting into our local study, large gap, and this comports with the regional study. There's a large gap between the number of households that could potentially benefit from affordable housing and the availability, the inventory. As the current population continues to age and either willingly or unwillingly due to a lack of housing options leaves the area, it'll be increasingly difficult to find people to move in and buy the large homes that they're vacating. Lori, check me on this one too. The current housing market is being driven by low inventory and a surge in pandemic-related relocation rather than economic growth, and the overall forecast for the market remains generally weak. This came from from that Don Poland study at the regional and local level. So, Lori, picking on you, is that?
I agree with the first part of the sentence. I'm missing the forecast for the market remains generally weak.
Yeah, not the current surge notwithstanding, but based on just the fundamentals, the economics of limited growth. So it's being So is it fair to say that a lot of this is the cost and the hot market is being driven by low inventory?
Yes.
Okay. Rather than growth. That's the key factor.
Yes.
So maybe I'll put long-term forecast just to be more specific about that. Give me a sec to make a note in here. Because I'm going to reword it, say the long-term forecast for the market remains generally weak because of the because it's not economic growth driven. That's going to be hyphenated. Got it. Okay, and then the takeaways highlighted the future socioeconomic health of the communities at risk. We have opportunities to improve the situation. Housing is part of the problem and must be part of the solution. So that's going to be a wordy slide. I'm going to spend a little longer on this than I would on one that was more broken up or more graphical, but it's meant to just recap rather than introduce a lot of new information. Okay, slide 10 is another direct lift from the previous workshop, but it gets into a little more quantitative and itemized view of the gap. Won't spend long on that. Slide 11 is another direct lift. We'll spend almost no time on this, but just highlight that the Planning Commission, the Economic Development Commission have independently come to similar conclusions about the need for more options, including affordable. Okay, slide 12, that's a placeholder for the capacity analysis, so we'll introduce some new data here. I don't expect this to be more than 2, maybe 3 slides at most, to just put some semi-quantitative. We're not going to get real granular with data tables, but just some high-level summary data on how much land, how the land in Oline. Hi, Bill.
I had trouble getting on. I don't know why, but sorry.
No problem. We're on.
I see
You came at a
13.
good time. We've gone through
13.
the recap, and we're just getting into some of the new material.
Yep, I'm on 13.
Okay.
With you, or you're going on to 13.
Yeah, we're on 12. We're just on a placeholder for 12 right now. So I anticipate there'll be 2-3 slides tops on the interim results of the capacity analysis to just lay out what the current allocation of land in Oline is, and how much and where it looks like is capacity for new development. It's going to be based on current zoning regs. I think we're going to have the capacity to model in a what if scenario. So if there are, say, 100-acre parcel that's undeveloped in 2-acre zoning in an RU80, then how could that potentially be subdivided? But that's a little bit of a slippery slope. But mainly going to look at what's available now and under the current allocation and current zoning, and then with some at least directional notion of which way it could go if there were subdivision or zoning changes. And hopefully coming out of that, going forward with maybe a little capability to use this analysis as a model, a what if model. So that's going to be late breaking. Karen and I are meeting at like 1 o'clock on Monday to put this together, and I'll send it out, whatever we have on Monday night, and we can have a quick look at it before Tuesday. But if there's no objection, I think it's going to be worth including this, because it's going to, at least so far, based on the preliminary results, it looks like it's going to reinforce and underscore the assertion that we're making, which is an important one, that land availability is limiting our options. Was everybody good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay, slide 13. Okay, this is, again, stuff we talked about at the last workshop, but slightly reformatted and rearranged to tee up our thinking about strategy. So what are the options and how do we think about them? So the top 4 boxes on the left are the smaller scale, more naturally affordable multiplex clusters, the starter homes plus assisted mortgages, accessory units, and the repurposing. And on the right side is some of the attributes that make them that we're going to think about in placing them in the strategy. So the smaller scale, more naturally affordable, are scaled to work within limitations on land, water, and sewer, easier to work with, particularly the accessory units, and repurposing work within an existing land and infrastructure footprint. As a result, they're efficient, cost effective, and more environmentally friendly since they're not new. Then the second tier there is the add-ons, whether it's a mixed use add-on to an economic development project or like the McCulloch opportunity and an add-on to an open space acquisition. So these are good opportunities, but it's not something that can be started on their own. They need to ride in on an open space acquisition or an economic development project, but they're still good opportunities. And then the set-aside developments, particularly under the current 830G qualifications that say a set-aside development with only 30% affordable can qualify under 830G. So because these are larger, they're likely to be challenged by limitations on land, particularly for the single-family developments, or water and sewer, particularly by the multifamily set-aside developments. And as we've demonstrated, they can be 3 steps forward, 7 steps back, and actually add more market rate than affordable units in these. So also hold that thought for the legislative agenda that's in the notes. So that's laying out the options. Nothing new here that we haven't talked about. And then trying to roll that out. Now, this is starting to drill into, okay, what do we intend to do here? The what? So I'm going to slow down now on these.
Michael, just a quick question. This slide on page 13, is that relatively new? I can't remember it from the last time.
It was where we wrapped up the last time.
Okay, whatever. It strikes me as very good.
It was in a different arrangement of boxes.
Okay, maybe. Okay, I think it's really good.
I do too. I think it's clearer. I really like this slide 13.
Thank you. It took a while. I had to kind of ferment that for a while before it came out this way. There were a lot of iterations on this one, but thanks. I liked it too. I think I'm gonna leave it alone now. I'm not gonna look at it anymore. If you guys like it, I like it. I'm just gonna.
Well, it runs the whole gamut and
Leave it alone.
gives you yep, looks good.
Okay, so putting that all together on slide 14. This is kind of it's getting real now. So what do we propose to do? So the first point there is create opportunities for, again, I'll say this is stuff we've been talking about for a couple of years now, but it's coming together. Create opportunities for accessory units, small to mid-scale multifamily and clusters, including both owner-occupied and rental. And what that means is to enable some increased density in residential districts, increase the number of affordable homes within existing neighborhoods, not just as new and separate ones, and working within the land, water, and sewer limitations rather than banging up against them. So that's the first. The second is to promote starter homes with assisted mortgages through CHFA and USDA. So starter homes and assisted mortgages. The limitations on that and the risks associated with that, notwithstanding, that we're aware of them, but I think we've discussed it, and this is still worth doing, even though, as we just experienced over the last year, they're subject to ebbs and flows based on market conditions, because they're not frozen by deed restrictions. The third point there is to promote reuse of existing properties as qualified. So that would be town owned or bank owned, the distressed or blighted, commercial or residential, just to itemize what those could look like. The fourth bullet is, so that got through that top 4 boxes in green on the previous slide. So those are the ones that we feel like we can actually promote and go after directly. The fourth bullet pulls together the second tier there, where we're not going to be able necessarily going to be able to create opportunities ourselves, but we can seek opportunities for mixed use and open space add-ons in partnership with the EDC and open space as economic development projects and open space acquisitions come to pass. So we'll ride on those, but we'll keep track of those, keep the partnership going, keep the lines of communication open, and where there are opportunities to jump in and add some affordable housing into those projects, we'll take it. And then the last part of the strategy addresses the set-aside developments, which is be selective about those and get behind those that can solve the land, water, and sewer needs while adding a minimum number of market rate units. So that's going to be challenging, and we've seen that come up.
Michael, I wonder if on bullet number 1, creating opportunities for ADUs or smaller clusters, do we need to say anything or point it out, or maybe it's just a talking point that when we say enable some increased density in residential districts, that will mean a sort of working with zoning and planning to, figure out opportunities?
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this? So this is the what slide. The next slide is a how slide, Jen.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll flip to slide 15 then. So this is the what it will take. So a network of partnerships and resources within the old Lyme community and town government, including ongoing outreach, regionally with funding agencies, not-for-profit organizations, and private developers. I went back on my notes. If there's any significant partnering entity out there that I missed, let me know. I don't want to name names, but I want to at least get them categorized. The second major item on there, I guess to your point, Jen, which is changes to zoning regulations. So that's where we're going to need to get in the conversation with planning and zoning. So getting a little more specific here than we have in the past, and this is based in large part on the conversation I had with Paul Arzell and Dan Beret, where I think we're on the same page, and we're going to talk about this a lot more, but it would involve removing special use restrictions on ADUs. That's what we talked about most. Expanding allowed use of multifamily and clusters for affordable housing, potentially creating incentive and opportunity overlays the way that other towns have done. And this we haven't talked about a lot in the commission, but this is being pulled forward from the committee work, and it was in the findings and recommendations from the exploratory committee, which is at least to consider and have a conversation about inclusionary zoning regulations. And just to refresh our memories, that can take a couple of forms. So one is to have regulations that actually say if in the case of a subdivision and development, there needs to be a minimum percentage of affordable housing created along with the market rate. Some towns are doing this. It's typically less than 30%, but it is inclusionary. It's not under 830G. So it does serve to pull some affordable housing in with new developments. I think it's worth keeping on the radar screen. I don't know how much of an impact it will have when you think about our land limitations. We don't know how many large developments are going to be going in anymore, so there may be limited opportunity for this. But again, it's something that was on the findings and recommendations from the exploratory committee, so I think it's worth just keeping on the radar screen. And then the third bullet here is the promotion and incentive programs to attract development, whether that's promoting assisted mortgages, adaptive reuse, repurposing, and rentals is a tough one. Almost all the indicators point to a large gap in rentals and an increasing need for rentals. And there's very limited ways that we can directly influence the creation of rental versus owner occupied. So I have this kind of bundled under a general item of promotion and incentive that we're going to need to talk about more. I'll pause for any thoughts.
I was not, so rentals are included in affordable housing. Is it only for elderly housing or it's all residential housing?
All housing.
All housing.
Yeah, well,
It's just based on 25%.
yeah, 30% of the 30% of 80%, and a deed restriction. So both the occupant has to qualify, the tenant has to qualify, and the unit has to qualify based on the rent. So
Okay.
the occupant qualifies based on income, and the unit qualifies based on the rent.
Yeah, Lori, there would be rent restricted. So there's a table that comes out every winter that says what the maximum rent can be for certain apartments that are considered affordable.
Right now, it's about $1,250 in Old Lyme.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Wow.
explaining that.
So this isn't meant to be all singing and all dancing. It's just kind of laying out the kinds of things we're going to need to talk about. This is by no means an action plan. It's more of what do we need to talk about for implementation going forward. And my expectation is that when we actually publish the plan for the June 1st deadline, the action items on there are going to be, many of them are going to be follow-ups and additional discussion and additional planning. And some of them will be concrete action items, but a lot of them are going to be engage more stakeholders and take it to the next step. Zoning regulations in particular, I don't envision that we're going to come through with the wording for proposed regulatory changes, nothing close to that. But hopefully we can come through with some areas that we need to look at. Tied back to the strategy. So the items on this page are tied back to actually how we execute on the strategy.
It would be cool if we got like a private developer who wants to do like 50%, affordable and 50% market rate and do something like that. That would be cool.
Hold that thought too, Jen. That's on the last page of this deck is some notes on, on how we want to lobby on changes to 830G, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I think that would be a win-win.
Yeah. And that gets into the incentive programs too. So these aren't all standalone. They all tie together.
Yeah, because what we could do, you could think about saying like, okay, well, in Old Lyme, if you come in and you build a nice development in the character of our town that's XYZ, we'll give you X incentive to, make sure that 51% of them are affordable or something like that.
Right. And if you want to come in and do rentals, maybe we can provide some incentives to get more rentals in town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are kind of conceptual, but they're starting to zero in on at least the areas more specific areas that we need to discuss further and focus on to implement the strategy. All right, slide 16. Okay, that's a placeholder for the poll. We have an opportunity to do another pulse poll. So I've been scratching my head some on what questions we would put out. And maybe it's just a lack of creativity, but I think we want to ask some of the same questions we did last time, because one of them is the strategy on the right track? We could add the word still on this one. Strategy still on the right track, because we got very positive feedback about that last time. The other was gauging the comfort level of folks with having some of the housing types that we talked about in their neighborhood, whether that's an accessory unit, a duplex, or a small cluster. And we got a readout on that. We may want to get another readout on that after this presentation. And the other question that we asked was if the respondents could support an investment in adaptive reuse. And we got positive results from that one too. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we would put that one up again because we haven't really zoomed in on that. We spent some time on the last workshop, but at least the housing types.
Yeah, and I think for adaptive reuse, we probably need to put a little more work into it to find out exactly how that would go, as because we don't have things on the tax list and on the grand list that have been taken back. So I think we would need to put in some effort. But how do we approach people who may have blighted properties, and how do we convince them to convert those?
Yeah, and maybe that wraps back to having an incentive program.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we gotta think through that a little bit more.
I feel like we've advanced the thinking some on some of the like ADUs, the starter homes and such, but we haven't really advanced the thinking as much on reuse. So I think I'm agreeing. Jen.
Okay. All right, I'll think about it.
So just a couple of minutes of brainstorming. Any other questions that we'd like to put on a pulse poll that would help gauge the reaction to what we're proposing? And
what about
oh, Bill, I'm just seeing you now. I just switched back to the screen. Welcome back, Beard.
oh you're on, you switch, you didn't lose me all this time, did
No,
you?
I was looking at the slides and taking notes on
No,
them. So
we saw you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I might have taken it off for a couple of weeks, I guess.
Last time you didn't.
It's been back a couple of weeks. Could we ask a question about people support for some incentives by the town? And I don't know if we would name the incentives or incentives to increase affordable housing. So I like what Jen was just saying, whether it was, actually what Jen said was, if we would increase some, if we could get a builder to increase the number of affordable housing in a given project, that the town could offer some incentives. I don't know exactly what they'd be. Usually these things are in the terms of taxes, but to see if people would support that kind of incentive.
That's a great question, Bill. It's one that I asked myself. I'll tell you where I got, but then I want to hear from everybody else too. Which is it would have to be pretty conceptual at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the process now of coming up with a developer outreach that may let us evolve the thinking on that to be just a little bit more concrete so that we can ask more specific questions. So when we asked about investment by the town in adaptive reuse, that at least had a had a target. So I'm of two minds on it. I think it's definitely of interest. My thought on it was prior to the developer outreach, it might be just a little bit premature. And then maybe for this one, we could move that question into the open Q&A because we have those bubbles on there. Like, where do you think might be a good place for affordable housing? We could just kind of put an open question and throw it out to the audience. Say, what kind of incentives do you think might be useful?
That's not a bad idea. Or if there are, do we know of any incentives? In other words, another option is to give some choices or give some examples and allow people to say, check as many as they want.
I certainly don't have anything like a comprehensive list. I got some anecdotes for what happened before, but doesn't really have critical mass. But if anybody else does,
Mhm.
open to it. And
Yeah,
we do have this developer outreach thing coming. So we should get some feedback that will help guide us.
Yeah, one of the things, Bill, to your point, is one of the things that they are looking at, just from my preliminary digging around and talking to just two people actually, is that, like, what's your target audience? And so we want to kind of narrow in on what, well, we don't have to narrow in on what our target audience is, but a developer would want to narrow in on what a target audience is. So there's a huge difference between 30, 50, 60, and 80% of AMI. And, we would want to hone in on that, or they would, as far as before they begin any type of project. And then, of course, that would also go towards, the operating income that they get, the amount of vacancy rates that they have, and things like that. So it all kind of tied together. But like my first thought is that would be what they're looking at first, is like, who will come to Old Lyme to live in these places? or who in Old Lyme will move to such a place. And what's that need? And if we're sort of sticking, I mean, we have been sticking sort of in that higher end of the AMI, right? The 60 to 80%
Yeah.
range. And if we kind of go out there with that as maybe not an assumption, but just as a preliminary thought, we can talk to developers in a more specific way about saying, this is kind of the range of incomes that we're talking about. So the affordability ranges are here versus, $1,200 a month. It might be, $1,900 a month, something like that. So we can kind of build up from the ground, if you will, and look at, what their net operating income is going to be. Because that's how they all generally will plan, is around how much money they're going to make off of what they're outlaying. So I think maybe I think we've thought about it, but I think when we approach people, we want to kind of consider that that's the range that we might be targeting first, versus going for the more of the habitat end, which is the 30% of AMI.
I guess I certainly understand that, and I don't this may just be something way ahead of itself, but I was thinking to the property, the project in Stonington that was proposed maybe a couple months ago on a kind of an abandoned property.
Campbell Green.
Yeah, and it was resoundingly voted down because there were incentives, tax incentives that were going to be passed on, and I guess other incentives. And again, I don't know what these are, but and the town feeling, or at least the expressed feeling, was all this is making the developer profit and gonna burden our town. So I guess it just had my mind going in, are people are they thinking that the importance of affordable that it's that important that there should be some incentives or not. But maybe without specifics, it's just more of a concept that isn't. And at the same time, I'm struggling to think, because I think the pulse poll is great, but I think you have to think of it's important to try to get as engaging a questions as we possibly can.
I think
I'm
it's
taking
a good point.
a lesson back from the ARPA committee too, Bill, where they put out a polling question that says, would you support ARPA funding for affordable housing? And it came in with 38% support. We did a presentation on what affordable housing is and why it's important. We asked about it and it came in at 76%.
So 76% of the people who attended that meeting.
So with context and background, it doubled the response, the positive response rate.
And I think it's the same, like
Educating a lot.
Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I think having people educated about what affordable housing really is is a huge part of this.
I was just going to say too, like Bill, I remember when I lived in Jersey in the 80s and they were creating economic development zones, for builders to come in and build like shopping malls or things like that. And there was great opposition to it because they got 10-year, tax breaks as far as the development goes. But now they're very thriving, communities with zero tax breaks. So there, I think it's just one of those long-term, strategy thoughts that people have to wrap their head around. Like, well, it's not fair to me because I'm paying taxes and this guy's not paying any. And but I think, like John said, the more that we can sort of have talking points about that, the better. And nobody's saying that it's a tax abatement or tax, free. We're just saying that maybe we need to look at creative ways of incentivizing developers to come in
And have a well-formed value proposition for it.
I find the blight housing really interesting because, as we know, there's no blight laws in Old Lyme that you look at. So if you had a small ranch house in a situation, would it be possible? I mean, is it an option? I mean, possibility of being able to give them a tax reduction or something on what they owe. That's an interesting idea.
The other place blight comes in, Laurie, is with adaptive reuse. So any kind of distressed property.
Wow.
So yeah, the incentive there could be, if it's redeveloped as qualified affordable, can there be some kind of incentive for that?
I might volunteer my cottage here on Heflon to be the first one. I need some economic incentives to stay here for sure.
So Bill, back to your original suggestion. Where you at?
Well, I think it's still interesting to see if people, how strongly people would feel about, backing those, any kind of incentive. But I also liked your idea of throwing it out as a discussion question, although I guess that's the only way to do this. The pulse poll is only, there's no way for people to answer in a non-multiple choice way, is
There's no
there?
essay questions, no.
No, or even like yeah, you'd have to give them choice. But I did like your idea of saying, what do you think are some incentives that could be offered?
Yeah, I like that as well. Yeah. And then I think, what we've been talking about ARPA a little bit, but, there are other standard grants, subsidies, et cetera, that HUD always offers. And so, there are other opportunities in the housing world, if you will, besides ARPA. So that could be an option if we get down to, brass tacks and want to put together a proposal.
Yeah, that's up in the HOW list under the funding institutions, Jen, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there are quite a bit, for sure, especially lately.
State, federal, not-for-profit. There's funding out there.
Well, I perhaps though, just going back to another question, even though we did ask it the last time, but now this is a second workshop. Is it worth asking if, I was going to say, if after this workshop has your what did we say the last time, concept of affordable housing, or has your understanding increased? Could we ask a question about whether people attended the first presentation or not? That might be of some interest to us, just to know, do we have an audience here of people who came once and they're here to find out more, or they missed the first time and they, so I can catch it now, we'll see where we're at, but that might be an interesting question.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Bill. And that would help us interpret some of the results we get too.
Because I was going to say the benefit of that would be that is if we do ask the would you be in favor or against, or whatever the question was about, affordable housing kind of in your backyard or whatever, and we had a good favorable response. But we showed them the different ADU types. We showed them, various housing types, and that's not in this presentation. So if they missed the first one, they may still not understand exactly what those ADUs look like or what those opportunities look like. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, so if it changed, so anyway, I think that would at least be something that would be of interest to us.
Yeah, I like both the questions, and I like the so yeah, I would say up front, just question number one, did you attend the first one? And then follow that with or maybe the last one would be, is the strategy still on track? And then pepper that in there somewhere with the one about if it was feasible to place examples of affordable housing within your community, would you be in favor of that? And then, do you want to volunteer for the commission?
Uh,
Or the building committee? Or the you might be on mute, Lori.
But seriously, that is a good question. Would you be interested in helping with affordable housing,
Yeah,
different capacities? That's a very good one.
yeah, because I mean, once we start on this, you know, I think we'll probably, you know, try to get the housing committee or the McCulloch Property Committee, whatever we want to call it, the building committee, you know, that's kind of like a next step right after June or sooner than that, whatever we decide. But I do think that it's a different skill set. It's somebody that, you know, like John knows a lot of people in town that might be amenable to that. And it's a different focus, you know, that's like the nitty gritty and the details and the project management of it all.
how about that being a question as well, though? That because of the, I don't know if there is a real possibility of a community build in Old Lyme. Would you be interested in participating in such a project? Because I think, I mean, there has been word about that out, not so much out of the commission, but certainly out in the community. And maybe that's not even a bad way to generate a personal connection between people thinking about it and saying, yeah, I'd work on it, or something like that. I don't know, just a thought.
Only risk there is we will not have talked about it one sentence in this workshop.
Yeah.
But we will probably do, when it comes time, hopefully, if over the next several weeks, things stay on track, we will be probably coming out again with another public forum on that project, and we'll have an opportunity to ask that more directly.
I'm just trying to think of things that are different or new that we might be able to.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel the need to just fill air here with questions. Let's ask the questions that are going to help us, that are going to help guide us to bringing the strategy and plan home for June 1st. Because we'll have other opportunities. I think this.
Agree. I was trying to look back at the EDC notes, and one of the things that Tim was concerned about is that are we going to be able to, as he quoted, move the needle enough? And you know, he's still concerned that whether or not it can be done without water and sewer. Of course, we had the actual, you know, the Sound View Commission there and et cetera. So we did talk about sewers and water a lot. And then Martha Schumacher had asked, you know, how many ADUs are there, and does the zoning board know how many permits they issue for ADUs? And another fellow whose name escapes me, first name John, but I can't remember his last name. He just kind of laughed and said, "Oh, they just appear all over the place." You know, but they're there, but nobody knows that they're there because they don't go for permits. And so it kind of led to just a little back and forth discussion amongst the constituents, you know, the people at the meeting about, you know, what, you know, how that would actually go into play, like as if we sort of moved the needle on ADUs, and is that something that would be easier, you know, in my mind anyways, it would be easier to incentivize perhaps getting a permitted ADU for a temporary you know, or permanent, but mostly it's probably going to be temporary, you know, qualified rental, qualified affordable rental. And so maybe that's like a baby step that we could approach with the zoning board, you know, around 21, 29, and get our foot in the door that way. But I wonder if maybe there's a question around just ADUs in general, specifically, rather, not generally, rather than sort of saying, would you be comfortable with, you know, 5 cluster homes in your neighborhood, or would you be comfortable with this? We could say like, well, like if your neighbor decided to, you know, put a mother-in-law apartment on the back of his house, that's another parking spot perhaps, etc. Like, would you be comfortable with something like that? Maybe, I don't know how to phrase it properly right now, but.
Yeah, and it's another instance where we will have not covered it at the same level of detail as last time. So I'm kind of getting talked as I'm listening to this. I'm kind of getting talked out of putting that whole thing in, just because I'm reluctant to ask questions where we haven't given background, because we've seen again and again that
I agree.
the informed respondent gives the more usable answer.
I say maybe we stick to gauging the level of understanding and the level of satisfaction with our progress.
Yep. And were you there last time?
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Otherwise, you open Pandora's box.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
And we're on a roll here, and it's almost, it's going to be at the end of the presentation. So let's end on
Right. Okay.
That's good.
All right. Good discussion.
Oh shoot, Michael, I have to jump off for my board meeting. I will talk to you guys later.
Okay, Jen.
Okay.
Bye.
Sorry. All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jen.
All right. Thanks, John. Bye.
Okay. So you're on the pulse poll. After that, you see two placeholders just for the normal summary and next steps. And then go to the open Q&A, and I'll add that fourth bubble in there. And then I'm just going to take a minute on the last page here, which is not part of the presentation, but as I'm doing this, I just kind of take notes.
Right.
So that's slide 20 in this pack. So the first is around goals. So what we have not done and will not present at this is any kind of quantitative goal, as in we are going to try to build X number of qualified affordable units over the next Y years. And
Not even just one?
well,
I'm kidding.
non-zero. So non-zero is a given. But our strategy focuses, at this phase at least, on understanding what the needs and capacity are, and then creating an environment where more affordable housing can be created. And I think goals are going to be important, but I'm just saying it out loud that we don't have goals in this iteration of the plan. And I would propose that we put it in as a placeholder, acknowledge that we want to set goals, but we want to do it based on another round of discussion with the stakeholders, an improved sense of what the art of the possible is going to look like, and then go from there. And also the markets are all in flux right now. So
yeah, but to be thoughtful, attainable goals. I agree.
Yeah, we don't want to get boxed into goals that we're pulling from soft data and changing conditions. So if you look at Essex, I'm not going to say a lot. I've looked at multiple published town plans, and it seems like there's a pattern among towns that have low single digit percentages, like below 5, are picking like, we're going to aim for 5%, just as something that's a next step. Essex did that. I think Salisbury did that. So they were down to 2%, and they're going to say, well, we're going to try to get to 5% over the next 10 years. Was kind of what they were throwing out there. And, that's aspirational, but I'm personally more comfortable with acknowledging that we have more work to do to set goals that we can really build a project plan to achieve and measure ourselves against. But I'm open to discussion on that.
Well, I think it's a little early to come to those goals.
I agree, and it's a bit knee jerk, So we're so low, but you don't have a road to get there. We got to make sure we have a good path, a good road, and that we're going to they'll be attainable goals.
Yeah, who came up with that saying, John? When you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yes, exactly.
So it's implicit in these goals that not in the goals, in the strategy, that a lot of the strategy is about understanding what we're up against and understanding how we can create a more conducive environment for affordable housing. But there's more to do in the area of the zoning regulations, figuring out exactly, to Bill, to your great point, what are incentives, what do they look like, and how do they fit into this?
I also think it'd be, once we get that land study,
Oh, the
really,
capacity
what
analysis.
Yeah, it,
Critical.
what are we working with?
Yeah.
Because, it'd be great to get to whatever percentage, but if, it's unattainable due to that, or the attainability is smaller level, it'd be great to, base it on actual real live data.
Yeah, reality is good. So I'll have that somewhere in the summary then. And next steps, particularly next steps, is
That'd
to
be
have
great.
conversations that'll bring us to goal setting. Okay. And then, so the second bullet on there is I've been keeping notes on the legislative agenda. I don't have really high expectations that within the timelines we're working at, that we're going to make major changes to state or federal regulations that affect this, but it's nice to know what we want. So one of them we've talked about at some length, which is advanced septic technology, which is, instead of just banging up our heads against the need for public sewer systems, is to take advantage of emerging technology in advanced septic treatment so that we can go on site. So on-site septic, and basically the theory here is that you have additional capacity on site, so you can increase density without needing sewers. So, and we're not alone. I've been in a couple of regional forums, and this has come up there as well. So I think there's a head of steam on this one.
For that, there's got to be regulation changes because,
yeah,
or adaptation changes.
And just have them approved for use. Massachusetts and New York have made progress in this area. So it's not unprecedented. We wouldn't be at the leading edge. We'd be a step behind Massachusetts and New York, particularly on South Shore, Long Island, which shoreline.
Absolutely. But you do know how long it takes a change for construction to happen, Michael, don't you?
Yeah, that's why I said low expectations that any of this is going to happen within our timelines. But it's nice to know what we want, and started moving.
A change in education and construction is a 50-year change.
Yeah, maybe our great grandchildren will be able to sign off.
Exactly.
Regarding sewers and septics and the McCulloch property, are we able to have a shared septic down there, or do you see two individual septics?
The way it's staked out right now, Lori, there'd be two, and
Two.
There'd be two because they're 2 3-acre parcels too, so they're distinct. So
okay, just curious.
They're 2 separate parcels. So at this point, it's not. We would have, and actually, there's a deed restriction on the land that says you can only build 1 unit on it, 1 detached unit on each, for a total of 2. Okay, and then I took some notes on 830G as we went through this. So Jen brought this up earlier. So one of the things is to raise the qualification threshold for set-asides to over 50% to get out of this scenario where it's 3 steps forward and 7 steps back when you do a 30/70 development. Then the 10%. So set the exemption threshold for each town based on a capacity assessment, including land availability, infrastructure, environmental considerations. So instead of having a one-size-fits-all 10%, if you want to take that approach with 830G for exemption, dial it into each municipality's reality.
We have so little land available, so that's important.
yep.
Very much so.
Yeah, this capacity analysis is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll see what the capacity analysis comes up with.
Third note there, I'm not going to present any of this. This is just for our notes.
Right.
Reducing the dependency on deed restriction and recognizing naturally affordable houses that might not be deed restricted, even if it's a transient, even if it's got to be remeasured every year. But this goes back to the data. If you look at the statewide inventory of affordable housing, only 2 or 3% of it is deed restricted. The vast majority is subsidized rentals in the form of senior community and some of the HUD financed housing. The second biggest category is assisted mortgages. So that's the CHFA and USDA mortgages. And it's a significant, it's not a close second, but it's a significant fraction. It's more like 20%. And then deed restriction is only 2 or 3% statewide and in across the board in municipalities, including those that have already that have made the 10% or more and been exempted. Even the ones that have made the 10% and exceeded the 10% still have a very low proportion of their affordable housing being deed restricted. So I think there's in our list of unlikely changes, a reduction of dependency on deed restriction and more emphasis on naturally affordable and assisted mortgages would be in order. And then the fourth note I had would be to recognize regional collaborations. So for example, if East Lyme provided sewer capacity for an affordable housing project in Old Lyme, maybe we could share in the credit for it. Or if, say, Lyme and Old Lyme got together to fund it, to provide joint funding for a project that was located in one of the towns, that there would be another means to share the credit on that. So those are just some notes as scratching our heads about the limitations we're under and the challenges we have is how the 830G could maybe provide some incentive and some structure to make progress on that rather than a disincentive. But if you have any other thoughts on that as you think about it, I'm keeping a list.
Okay.
And
Sounds
River
good.
copies too. So that's what I got. There's still some work to do. Most of the open spaces, not the open spaces, most of the placeholders now are for the capacity analysis that's going to be late breaking. I'll send that out before Tuesday, but not much before Tuesday. The pulse poll, I'll pick up on the discussion we just had and put those in. And then the summary and next steps are pretty much just recap items.
Perfect.
So there we are. Any other thoughts, having looked at this, albeit briefly? Okay, done hearing none. I'm going to keep working on this. I will send out another iteration within a day or two. As you look at I think in terms of the strategy, the recap is what it is. If you have any comments on how to more succinctly or effectively recap the work, I can't do the whole last presentation again and bring our new audience up to the same place through the same path. We have to take a shorter path to jumpstart folks that weren't at the first workshop. But if you see any important points in there that weren't included, or there's a way to compress it even further, please let me know. And then the real focus is on that, like slide 12, 13, 14 in there, where we're actually fleshing out what we are proposing to do and what it will take to do that. So again, as you think about that, you have any comments on what could be made more clear, or if there are gaps in it, or certainly if there's any errors in it, please send that along by email, and I'm sure I'll do an iteration on this over the weekend, and then the capacity analysis results will come in on Monday. And Karen Martin from SLR is actually going to be presenting that, but we'll be putting it together on Monday in the afternoon.
So Karen Martin will be presenting on Tuesday night?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. She'll be there, and she's working most closely with the GIS team at SLR, who are pouring through the maps and the zoning regulations and the data, and she's going to prepare the material on it. So there'll be some handoffs. I'm gonna cover the intro, the recap and the strategy. Hand it off to. Well, I'm going to handle the intro and the recap. I'm going to hand it off to Karen to do the interim readout from the capacity analysis, and then I'm going to pick it up again to talk about the what and the hows of the strategy. Then we'll do the pulse poll, summarize, and get to the discussion. So I'm not going to say that it's going to be shorter this time than it was last time, but I feel less challenged in fitting the presentation part into an hour or less because there's less data.
Hmm.
So there we are. Thank you. It was a very good discussion. And thank you for indulging the kind of barrage of emails I've been sending out and the late breaking stuff, but this is coming together in real time.
Thank you, Michael, for all the time you spent
Thank
preparing
you.
it.
You do a lot.
Well done.
Michael, thank you very much. Fantastic.
Yeah.
My pleasure, truly. Hopefully it'll come to something. That's what it's all about. If we can get some more people who need affordable housing into a place they can afford, then it'll all be worth it and a lot more.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
Hey, have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
On that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Second.
So I got Bill and John.
Yes.
Discussion? None? Okay, move the question. All in favor of adjourn? Signify.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
And Lori,
everyone. Have a great weekend.
thanks to you for the perspective on the market stuff. You know, I read and get it from other people, but you have your finger on the pulse of it.
Hello.
Okay, folks.
Who's there?
I'm going to stop the recording now since we're adjourned, and then